Welcome to another marvelous gamers. Today we are diving into the nostalgic world of side-scrolling shooters and putting the spotlight on 30 remarkable games that pay homage to classics like Contra and Metal Slug. These titles aren't mere imitators. They are the real deal, bringing back the excitement, challenge and nostalgia that run-and-gun fans crave. From intense enemy wave survival to jaw-dropping boss battles, each game on this list packs a punch. So if you're ready to discover some genius and exhilarating high-octane experiences, let's jump right in and explore these brilliant Contra and Metal Slug clones. Blazing Chrome. Our first run-and-gun packs a whole lot of flair. Blazing Chrome was inspired by Contra and partly by Metal Slug. The developer, Danilo Diaz, happened to be a Contra Slug aficionado and was going for a title that brought together the fast-paced, frenzied gameplay from Contra with Metal Slug's challenging mechanical bosses. This is also the same studio that created Anakin, which is also known for its Contra resemblances. But Blazing Chrome goes the extra mile. It will make you feel like you're run and gunning your way through Contra titles like Hard Cores or Alien Wars. Set in 21XX, a post-apocalyptic era, Blazing Chrome takes place after a war that nearly caused human extinction to tell the story of a resistance fighter, Marva, and his pre-programmed resistance bot, Doyle, as they fight back against the army of robots that have taken over the world. Super Cyborg. For those who crave that classic 80s Contra gameplay and vibe, Super Cyborg is often regarded by quite a few as the new age Contra. This clone manages to let you enjoy a modernized title while still holding true to Contra's soul. As you play, you're going to be greeted by familiar mechanics, Super Contra's ROM hack and the lock button, and Contra 3's continuous fire. You'll also find similar weapons and power-ups here, in addition to the fact that your character even stands, like the way it looks on screen while standing, identical to any other Contra character. Even the story is nearly unchanged. You play as this hunky battle cyborg on a mission to investigate an island. When you get there, you find yourself surrounded by a group of freaky aliens who you must then defeat. True to its new age reputation, Super Cyborg makes for warning-worthy difficulties and very slyly pairs them with simple controls. This one was also among the first few to feature Konami's infamous cheat, the Konami Code, and I personally love it for its colourful, trippy visuals. Valfaris. With an extremely metal soundtrack and extremely badass boss fights, Valfaris brings a Slain-like, unforgiving and gory world and adds Contra's best weapon types to it. While the gameplay emphasizes ranged combat with these, you also have some awesome melee weapons to beat foes that might just prove to be more challenging than your typical Contra enemies. This 2019 title comes with its own weapon upgrade system, which feels out of place in a Contra clone, but it makes the game more engaging nonetheless. Valfaris follows the story of a long-haired warrior named Therion, who you play as, in returning home to the planet of Valfaris only to find it overrun by chaos and demons. You must now embark on a quest as Therion and try to get to the bottom of the havoc. Midnight Resistance. Adopting more or less the same mechanics and controls as Contra, Data East released Midnight Resistance to have their own Contra clone to make money off of. It's worth mentioning, however, that the respectful amount of the game plays as a pseudo-sequel to another Data East game titled Heavy Barrel. While it's a challenge for any game to be as technically sophisticated as Contra, Midnight Resistance still manages to exhibit a gameplay experience that one associates with the genre, the kind of experience that made the Contra games a monster. Johnny Ford is an agent who works against the deadly drug cartels in South America. One fine day, when Johnny returns home after a mission, he finds his house turned upside down and a note left behind. The note explains that his family has been kidnapped by the evil drug lord King Crimson, and Johnny must now take things into his own hands to put an end to his evil empire. Iron Meat. Our next run-and-gun Contra clone picked up on the arcade and console classics mechanics its 2D horizontal and vertical scrolling levels, the classy pixel art and Contra's fine designed levels. However, this one is far more violent in comparison and might often leave you shocked, given that you'll find a lot of severed limbs on its pixelated floor. In yet another apocalyptic future, the world is overrun by a metal-hungry mutant titled The Meat, who possesses the ability to mutate anything that gets in its way. You play as Vadim and run and gun your way through its platformer stages with their different bosses to uncover secrets beyond the earth. This one's still in the oven and is said to be coming out sometime in 2024. Hunt Down. Our next hard-boiled arcade shooter takes us back to the 80s in a grindhouse cityscape run by gangs. You play as one out of 3 bounty hunters, a cyborg, a human or a robot, and fight against each level's petty lowlifers before taking on its boss. I quite liked Hunt Down, to be honest. The old school visuals and perfect sound design pair really well with a dash of retro chic vibe that pays homage to the games that inspired it. While it's inspired by quite a few, the shooting gameplay here screams Metal Slug. What makes Hunt Down special for me is how well formulated its recipe is. The sum of all its varying inspirational parts forms a unique experience like no other. While it's true that there are plenty of clones for Contra or Metal Slug fans to consider for their fix, you're highly unlikely to find one that's as good as this overall. Super Time Force Ultra. Super Time Force Ultra STFU is the outcome of a Toronto game jam in 2011. The theme for the event was What Just Happened. A 3-person team submitted their entry, Super Time Force, and explained it to be a Contra clone, a side-scrolling shooter that adheres to the established formula but also adds its own artsy temporal tweak to it. I had a blast running through the deadly bullet hell levels. It was complete mania, and I was clutching onto whatever was left of my 30 lives. The timeout mechanic only made things crazier by allowing me to rewind back to where I started from and then fight along with a ghost version of my own character. The Super Time Force is a group of time-traveling military specialists. They navigate the timeline under the orders of Commander Ripitsky, whose goal is to make alterations to the past or the future for the improvement of the present. While it's described as a Contra clone, the influence of Metal Slug is apparent too. STF Ultra merely refers to the updated version of Super Time Force. Butcher. Butcher, our next 2D platformer, runs to multiple late 80s to 90s games for its inspiration. Its classy retro feel doesn't feel too far off from that of Doom, Contra, Metal Slug and Abuse. With only 3 variations of hard difficulty settings on offer, the challenge here is deadly and often sees you outnumbered. You must face armed enemies while overcoming obstacles and traps. Very Metal Slug, right? Inhuman, relentless, unstoppable. You have only one purpose: murder. Cleanse the earth of human vermin. Exterminate them all. Starring a Terminator-type android protagonist, Butcher has you play this relentless character as you descend to the earth with the simple goal of killing everything that moves. Butcher doesn't limit its players to the time limits like some of the other popular arcade games. Instead, it just times how long it takes you to clear a level so that you can beat your previous record with a better score when you finish it. I've enjoyed a good many speedruns through this gory challenger, and it is indeed brilliant and so very cool. Beirut. Hardcore Gaming 101 dubs Beirut to be the one Contra game that Konami never got around to making. This 1989 run-and-gun side-scroller not only features the retro aesthetic, but comes with some killer boss battles. As if having a similar gameplay style didn't already make it a tempting buy, Beirut also comes with some very Contra-like power-ups that give you different types of firepower, like the spread shot or explosives. Beirut, not unlike a lot of the games from its time, tells the kind of story that we call an excuse plot. An excuse plot is when the devs attach a story to the gameplay, even if the title's entire focus lies on its gameplay. Instead of fighting aliens like the Contra games, here you are made to fight these silly thugs who belong to a terrorist group in a post-apocalyptic ruin. Among the hostages taken is the player character's girlfriend. You fight these waves of enemies to save her along with everyone else. There's nothing wrong with an excuse plot, of course. It's simply that this one's focus lies on its kick-ass shooting sequences. Outrage. Running around, dodging, jumping and shooting anything you can set your eyes on? Outrage does it all after 3 long decades in the pot. Yup, this one took 30 years to finally come out as a Commodore 64 title. Outrage as a clone doesn't really copy either Contra or Metal Slug. Instead, it captures their essence in its 8-bit gameplay and pays homage to them with its unique visual style. The mechanics and the game's style are familiar, and Outrage does a great job of capturing the nostalgia and delivering equally challenging difficulty levels while being a fresh experience altogether. After failing to defend your base from an enemy's cowardly attack on an alien planet, you, the player, see everyone you know and love slaughtered. On this alien planet, where you lost all you knew, you must now pick up the gun and kill everything that gets in your way as you serve justice. Demon Front. With almost every aspect of the gameplay similar to that of the Metal Slug games, Demon Front might be considered what we call the ultimate clone. Leaving the vehicle commandeering ability aside, most of the gameplay remains unchanged, and the vibrant graphics, similar to the source material, are seen here too. What makes Demon Front a special clone though is the inch of hair that sets it apart from Metal Slug. What I found to be unique and very interesting in this one was the fact that all 4 playable characters come with their own pets, which have their own attack as well as defense abilities. In fighting its various mutants, machines, monsters and bosses, you follow a narrative on the planet Andres, some 20 light years away from Earth. While Andres was once a peaceful place, it was taken over by these evil beings after a red lunar eclipse. Among the few survivors are Dr. J, Maya the Ape Man, and standard humans Jake and Sarah. Playing as these 4, you set out to retake Andres. Vengeful Guardian, Moonrider, yet another clone by Joy Masher, the minds behind Blazing Chrome and Anakin. Vengeful Guardian, Moonrider is a testament to how great the studio is at combining retro favorite titles to deliver astounding new experiences. As you rush through this one's environments, you can't help but think you've seen this kind of visual art before. By the time you get to the heavy resemblance boss battles, you're sure of it. The visuals, level design and enemies are similar to H.R. Geiger's Anomalies, artwork seen abundantly in the Contra series. After the commendable Contra clone that we found in Blazing Chrome, Joy Masher went on to make this one and decided to evoke retro titles like Strider, Ninja Gaiden and The Revenge of Shinobi. Certain aspects of the experience even feels like you're playing a Mega Man game. You control a robotic super soldier ninja called Moonrider. Having been a tyrannic, nightmarish government's creation, you join a resistance force and fight to overthrow your creators. Throughout the game, you find these modifier chips that allow you to alter your fighting style to gain the upper hand and cool abilities. Rogue Stormers. Our next game combines RPG and roguelike elements in its 3D world with chaotic run-and-gun mayhem. Rogue Stormers turned to Contra and Mercenary Kings for inspiration. True to Contra's unforgiving ways, Rogue Stormers is no easy game. If you die, you start over, and you will die quite a bit. You'll even find an equivalent of the spread gun from Contra here. Rogue Stormers' gameplay is only enhanced by its roguelike traits, wherein the randomness of its runs, its procedurally generated levels, only make it near impossible to memorize enemy patterns to proceed. Rogue Stormers feels great to play, and there's even a light story and a co-op multiplayer campaign to it for up to 4 players. This is a story that takes you to the diesel-powered medieval metropolis that is Ravensdale and has you play as one of 5 characters. All 5 of these have powered armor and big weapons. They are a part of the resistance that fights to protect the city from the mutated orcs and goblins. Clash Force. For those who are reminiscent of Contra's weapon pickups, the ones that you lost if you got hit by an enemy, Clash Force comes in strong as far as drawing inspiration from the Elder series goes. While the controls aren't the best here, and this title lacks Contra's famous multi-directional shooting mechanic, it bridges that gap by turning to Mega Man for its level design. The result of this was a platformer that had the fans going crazy. Clash Force never exhausts its reserve of interesting obstacles to toss your way. The bosses, like the Contra big bads, are bound to attack patterns that you could exploit. but the interesting twist here is that they evolve with the enemy's decreasing health. Playing this indie action platformer by Spicy Giro is kind of like taking a nostalgic trip down memory lane. You can't help but reminisce in this blend of retro-style NES favorites. You play as Voom, Scorpedo or Ekid through varied environments, including underground mines, enemy bases in the deep forest and deserts. The goal with this one is to stop the evil Dr. Crackman as he leads an army of minions to wreak havoc. You are the Clash Force, the only hope of putting an end to his treacherous plans. Mercenary Kings. Mercenary Kings leans far into action platformer territory. With aesthetics much like those of Contra's to offer, this title is a fast-paced frenzy. But its aesthetics alone doesn't render it a clone. In fact, its cloneness is most evident when you get into combat. Borrowing from beautiful old-school classics like Metal Slug, Contra and Monster Hunter, Mercenary Kings presents you with an amazing combat system. The whole thing feels so refined, and this combat shines best in the game's boss fights. You can also loot freely here in hopes of crafting better items to kick some ass in this gun and run. You play as a member of the Mercenary Kings, a team of hired muscle warriors who have a reputation for being the best at what they do on Earth. With most of your brothers-in-arms lost to the fearful forces of Claw, you gather your backup crew of specialist genius rogues and face Claw in this quest to save the world on an island lab. Anakin. Moving on to the next clone, Anakin is another that features RPG elements alongside its fast-paced action. This one goes beyond run and gun and opens players up to sword fighting too. Joy Masher made this one to be another among their list of titles that drew inspiration from retro classics. The inspiration in question for Anakin comes from Contra and Ninja Gaiden. Leaving aside grenades and vehicle segments, you don't have any ranged weapons, and these vehicle segments are very much like the ones we see in our all-time Contra favorites. If these things don't help you find your fix, the 7th mission, which you unlock upon game completion, stars a character who seems like she's straight out of a Contra game. When humanity is on its last leg following a global war, Anakin, a mega corporation, takes on whatever's left of humanity to unjustly and brutally rule over it. You play as Zaku, a ninja who joined the Liberation faction to lead freedom fighters in a war against the Anakin. Aliens Infestation. Following the events of Aliens and Alien 3, the USS Sephora manages to locate the USS Sulaco and sends a team of colonial marines to look into the remains and rescue any survivors. Players control 4 marines in these Sulaco remains as they uncover another of Wayland Yutani's shady plans. Permadeath is a real mechanic in this one, so try not to get too attached to your characters. This one, being a Contra Metroid clone, is a little poetic. We've come full circle. The Aliens franchise has been the key inspiration, the blueprint behind a lot in the world of gaming, particularly titles like Contra and Metroid. So it's only fitting that the game from the franchise takes back what it lent to the inspired ones and plays like a hybrid clone of the two. While Infestation adds its own twists to the formula, it's very obvious that H.R. Geiger's anomalies are at home here, more so than they were in Contra. Broforce. Our next marvelous clone is a bit of a parody. Broforce will take everything that Contra boasts, inject it with steroids, and star some of your pop culture favorites like Indiana Jones, Ellen Ripley, John Rambo, and the Terminator, and more. You play as one of the many bros here, and your goal is to fight terrorists and rescue your other pop culture icon bros who play prisoners of war in captivity. My favorite was probably the leader who guides the players here, Nelson Brodella. Contra's gameplay style, particularly the overwhelming frenzy of enemy projectiles that you must dodge across its platforms, is found in Broforce. It perfects the rich environments we saw in the Contra series. However, the slight twist to it is that Broforce has destructible environments, so you might want to be careful as you shoot around, especially in multiplayer, because while the world's fun to destroy, it will leave you at a disadvantage. This goofy parody immediately became an addictive experience for me. It's extremely well refined even outside of its environments, and the enemy designs are top-notch. Zombotron. The Zombotron series spans 4 games as of 2023 and turns to the frenetic action from run-and-gun classics like Metal Slug, Contra and Gunstar Heroes and makes for a thrilling action platforming experience in its post-apocalyptic worlds. We also found exploration elements similar to the Metroid franchise here. I noticed that these games take a couple of minutes before they reel you in. The PC versions in particular feel like they could have had better controls, but I was hooked 10 minutes in. There are these extremely satisfying physics-based kills and short action-packed moments of intensity as you play that keep you coming back to the Zombotron game for more. As I said, the storyline of the series is set in post-apocalyptic worlds and doesn't complicate things much, focusing merely on the protagonist's survival on a nightmarish planet as he attempts to escape. Rive. Wreck, Hack, Die, Retry. Rive, like its rather long title, is an interesting blend of quite a few genres. Among said genres are shoot 'em up, run and gun, platformer, and this is somehow also a Tetris game. Metal Slug's influence is quite apparent with this one. You'll find yourself facing hordes of enemy robots, multiple kinds all at once, that you're supposed to shoot down while also dodging the Tetris blocks that fall from above. Where Metal Slug allows players to commandeer vehicles, Rive lets them hack enemy robots to assist you in battle. A member of the dev team even admitted to Gradius and Metal Slug being among the many games that inspired Rive's gameplay on a Reddit AMA. Rive tells the tale of a scavenger in space called Roughshot. When Roughshot finds himself trapped on an unfamiliar starship, he is forced to form an unconventional alliance. In marketing this one, the creators laid great emphasis on how Rive lets you shoot the messenger if you're just there for the gameplay and couldn't care less about the story. Mighty Goose. It's no secret that the Metal Slug franchise was at the top of the charts as far as run-and-gun shooters go. Admittedly, the rivers of time washed over the franchise and gave way to quite a few titles that took to Metal Slug for inspiration. Mighty Goose is one such run-and-gun shooter that was aimed at recreating the intense action that SNK depicted in Metal Slug. Leaving the combat aside, you'll also notice that the overall look and vibe just scream Metal Slug. When a Goose comes across some heavy-duty futuristic machinery, he dons the armor to become an augmented bounty hunter Goose with some cool bionic arms and legs. He has now become the Mighty Goose. Playing as this titular hero, you run, jump, dodge and shoot your way through multiple sci-fi themed stages to face the evil Void King. Not to lose my cool, but geez, I absolutely adore Mighty Goose. It's such an adorably violent game. It's so much more than the inspiration and it looks awesome. Dolphin Blue. Set in a future where all the land has sunk underwater into the depths of the ocean and given way to a new adapted society which thrives off the sunken land's resources. This new form of civilization is divided into the evil empire and the royal army, who fight for control of the land. You have the option to play as either Aereo, who is an arms dealer, or Annie, the idealist royal army soldier. The pair are tasked with rescuing Princess Annette, leader of the royal army. I found the settings and plot on this one to be a refreshing break from the other clones out there. The Metal Slug series was impactful to say the least. The people who worked on it even went on to work on many of its clones like Gunforce. Dolphin Blue too is one such clone that plays like a spiritual successor. Where Metal Slug lets you control vehicles, Dolphin Blue will let you ride these super dolphins across not only the sea but also the land. Lastly, one can also find some classic Metal Slug weaponry here, like the Gatling gun or heat-seeking Valkyrie missiles. Cyberlip. Cyberlip tells a story that covers events from 2016 to 2030. When government-approved space androids go rogue in the wake of an alien invasion, military androids Rick and Brooke are tasked with eliminating the alien as well as the man-made threat by destroying the titular evil supercomputer. This one's a Contra clone by way of its cool hand-drawn graphics and audiovisual presentation. Moreover, it was actually designed by the folks over at SNK Corporation inspiration themselves. When I fired this difficult retro classic up, the gameplay, enemy designs and music confirmed that it took after Contra. While Cyberlip came out looking like a tribute to Contra-type titles, it was also abundantly clear that it plays like a predecessor to the Metal Slug series, with a plot like the Terminators. Axiom Verge. Borrowing elements from classic titles like Metroid, Bionic Commando and Contra, Axiom Verge uses the first of the three as a bit of a Trojan horse to house its Contra qualities. The combat sequences and their mechanics are in line with those of other run-and-gun titles, and Axiom Verge has a rep for surprising players with the polished quality and controls of its gunplay. The weapon spread, including Contra's very own spread shot, is a creative one, with most weapons specializing in their own unique shot angles. These may or may not be useful depending on the stage you're playing at. However, the most obvious influence here is that of Metroid, in how this title takes to a non-linear progression style. The story goes, young physicist Trace Eschenbrenner nearly dies when a frozen pressure valve in his Mexican lab causes a huge explosion. Trace wakes up in an unfamiliar alien environment called Sundra to a voice that can be heard talking to him. Here begins his journey to explore the world of Sundra and uncover its many secrets. Axiom's story was probably my favorite thing about it, and the fact that it's inspired by the greats surely makes it worthy of this spot on our list. Savage Halloween. Our next title is about as indie as it gets, and it has you play as one of three Halloween-themed heroes. Taking after the hardcore, each of these three has its own gameplay styles, strengths and weaknesses. This side-scroller run-and-gun definitely deserves some attention, not just because it is a game that delivers a challenge level equivalent to that of the Contra titles, or because it borrows elements from Mega Man, but simply because it's an awesome title that packs some dope visuals to get lost in. I think I actually even prefer Savage Halloween's freaky gothic level design over that of Contra's. In addition to the difficulty, you'll also find some very Contra controls on this one. You have the ability to lock your character in a position and use your analog sticks to control just the guns. The plot here is pretty straightforward. When a whole lot of monsters from the afterlife were stuck on Earth after an absolute rager of a Halloween party, they decide to settle down here and take over the world. Our three heroes are among the monsters who fight to find their way home. Nex Machina. Nex Machina plays like a neon version of Neo Contra and is viewed from a similar top-down isometric angle. This relentless twin stick also features a death mechanic similar to Neo Contra, where you're given a number of lives to exhaust before it's game over. What's more is that it manages to feel similar to the older game in the sense that it's one where you're constantly surrounded by an overwhelming number of enemies and are forced to pay attention to them if you want to avoid an embarrassing death early in the game. You need to keep evading and moving around constantly and maybe even avoid blinking in order to succeed. Next Makona is the kind of shoot 'em up that doesn't need its reputation as a Contra clone to make it popular. This one is the work of Housemarque, the studio known for making Resogun. The plot here talks of a future where mankind is so dependent on tech that they are too busy staring at their gadgets while the machines around them have evolved to surpass human intelligence. To prove that they are the superior life form, the machines take to killing humans. Warhammer 40,000, Shoot-Ass, Blood and Teeth. Emulating Metal Slug's arcade retro-style gameplay in a breathtaking manner, we have Warhammer 40k, Shoot-Ass, Blood and Teeth. Since this game only came out in 2022, we see tidbits of quite a few in this one. The influence of Contra is apparent by way of blazing chrome, in the sense that Shoot-Ass, Blood and Teeth packs a whole lot of run-and-gun action, and it packs it all tightly. Huntdown's 80s aesthetic is also among the many things that you will find in this one. I enjoyed this one for its art style and replay value, not to mention the presentation was top-notch along with its precise combat mechanics. This one moves on from the Space Marines to star the Orcs. And we all know what a game starring these bad boys entails. Yup, I'm talking colourful levels that you blast through while playing as one of 4 classes of Orcs. Hardcore. Uprising. Hardcore, Uprising barely makes the cut for this list, but I decided to cover it in this video after giving it a little thought. When I say it almost didn't make the cut, I don't mean that it doesn't bear a resemblance to Contra or Metal Slug, but that hardcore Uprising is a Contra game itself. Making for the 13th installment in the series, it's a prequel to the original Contra and Contra Hardcore. Kenji Yamamoto, a producer, revealed that the idea was to establish Uprising as a new franchise while linking this particular game to Contra Hardcore and also taking inspiration from older Contra titles. All that Contra is known for, you find in this one. The epic larger-than-life, patterned boss fights, co-op multiplayer, a difficult challenge, the side-scrolling gameplay and more. As far as the unique features go, this one lets you customize your character and weapons and also features new moves and mechanics. The plot takes place 20 years before the original Contra and gives you an adventure where you belong to a group of elite resistance soldiers to overthrow the empire that is the Commonwealth. Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection. While this Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection has more in common with Contra than it does with Metal Slug, it wouldn't be wrong to say that there's still a resemblance here. It's just that it aligns better with the design philosophy and mechanics that we find in the Contra games. The weapon switching and variety too feel more in line with Contra than the other series. The answer to what it does differently lies in the game's themes. Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection sticks to its medieval theme. Sir Arthur is a stocky knight. In all his glory, he is but a man who loves a woman and a princess at that. Now, you play as this charming challenger in the demon realm to save Princess Prinprin from the evil clutches of Astaroth, a demon lord. Soda Crisis. Our final title for this list is Soda Crisis. Think of this as an epic, totally awesome, cutting-edge homage to the retro classics of action like Metal Slug. The tight controls on this one, along with its fast-paced, powerful fighting sequences within short levels, make it a challenging experience. The style is similar to that of the Metal Slug games, and Soda Crisis comes with some of its own combo system and smooth platforming gameplay. The story is a bit of a doozy and implies that it's set in some sort of dystopian future where soda is all that people care about. They are all either soda addicts or soda has been declared the global currency. Our protagonist is a man from a lab who's been experimented on at the cost of a single soda can. Marvelous Verdict. And on that very thought-provoking note of a platforming adventure story about soda, our list comes to an end. Maybe you've been looking for more of that retro goodness that run-and-gun platformers like Contra and Metal Slug brought into the world of gaming. Maybe you just need a good challenge to enjoy with your friends in co-op. Either way, if there's something I've learned in all my years of gaming, and this is a bit of a hard truth, so bear with me here, it's that if you go out looking for a fix, you're not very likely to find a game that scratches your itch in that exact spot you want it to. But that being said, I hope this list came close to scratching your itch for the Contra Metal Slug-esque. Thanks and stay tuned.